Hey Ben, how's it going?
What's up, Jaunty? Good to see you, my friend.
You as well. This particular topic is really fascinating to me,
Yeah.
and yet it does seem intuitive. You know, since we've started learning about the gut microbiome, that whole sort of concept of your own little rainforest full of biodiversity inside your own body, that the variations between individuals with regards to what that I don't know what to call it, ecosystem, miniature ecosystem
It's called the
contains.
microbiome,
Mm,
and it is so unique to individuals that in the near future they'll be able to assess crimes by the bacteria that have been left behind by the perpetrator. The signature bacteria that have been left behind, like by the perpetrator, is so unique to the individual. It's almost like DNA.
right, it's like a fingerprint.
Yeah, like a fingerprint. We carry around a microbiome. We talk
Mm-hmm.
about the microbiome a lot these days, and that's kind of interesting right there. When I started talking about the microbiome 10 years ago, it was really very little we didn't really know about it. In fact, 25 years ago, or actually now when I graduated pharmacy school in 1986,
Mm.
there was very, very little information about the microbiome. I mean, if you went on, went to the library and did a search, you'd be lucky to find a few papers on the microbiome.
Mm.
Today, there's thousands of papers written every year, hundreds of papers written every year on the microbiome. So we have so much more understanding of what's going on inside the body, but it's not just the inside, or it's not just the digestive tract where we have the microbiome, where we have bacteria.
Mm.
Micro meaning microbes, small
Right.
entities,
Yeah.
cellular organisms, which, by the way, it's not just bacteria, it's also fungus. We also have a myco,
Mm.
M-Y-C-O, mycobiome, an
Mm.
additional microbiome. We've got single-cell yeast and
Mm.
single-cell fungus that live inside our bodies like bacteria. But it's not just in the digestive tract. Everybody these days is familiar, or most people these days are familiar with the microbiome in the digestive tract. But you got a microbiome in your lungs. You got a microbiome in your eyes.
Mm.
You got a microbiome in your mouth. You got a microbiome in your on your skin. In fact, now there's skincare products that are purporting to change the microbiome. So we all carry around a cloud of microbiome around us, so much so that there is a atmospheric microbiome. There's a microbiome sphere. Like you have an ionosphere and an atmosphere. There's actually a cloud of bacteria that emanate off of all 3 or 7 billion people on the planet. So bacteria are everywhere, and it's kind of funny because in the old days, and by old days I mean when I was a kid, it's like 50 years ago,
Mm.
we used to call what we used to call these microbes? We called them germs.
Oh, right, right.
Everyone was afraid of germs.
Yeah, you got to kill the germs.
Kill those germs. The
Mhm.
germs are the bad guys. Well, the germs are bacteria, basically, and they're not bad guys. In fact, only a small fraction of the bacteria on the planet, maybe 5 or 10% of the bacteria, less than 10%, are bad bacteria.
Mm.
90 to 95% of the bacteria on the planet are actually good bacteria. They're bacteria that help us process food. They're bacteria that help us detoxify. They're bacteria that help us break down fats. They're bacteria that help us get energy. In fact, this relationship between the microbiome inside the body and bacteria is what you're talking about when you talk about obesity. For years, they've known that when they gave cattle antibiotics, the cattle
Right.
got fatter,
Yeah.
almost to the point where antibiotics were like a standard treatment for farmers to use on their cattle because they get them more money for their cattle. So what is it about the antibiotics that were causing the cattle to get fatter? The antibiotics were killing the bacteria, and the bacteria were preventing, or killing bacteria was preventing the cattle from getting the energy that they need or processing energy correctly, and the sugar got turned into fat more readily. Well, why wouldn't it happen to humans? Beings, the same thing. What could it be that C-sections, which deprive the baby of a healthy microbiome, are behind childhood obesity?
Mm.
I talked about the triangle of disease many times, and the first 2 points on the triangle of disease are the digestive system and the blood sugar system. Once the digestive system goes awry, it's a short jump to having blood sugar problems or dysglycemia, and this is what childhood obesity is about. And this describes the link between the microbiome in the intestine and the way the body processes energy and how we handle sugar and sugar metabolism. And from there, of course, the third point of the triangle of disease is cortisol and hypothyroidism, and that's where you get all diseases. And this is what I've been talking about for years. These are the 3 fundamental points of disease that are three fundamental points of breakdown that underlie all chronic degenerative disease. And if you don't address these 3 points and you try to deal with heart disease without addressing the 3 points, or autoimmune disease without addressing the 3 points, or any other health challenge without addressing the 3 points, not going to be very successful. But if you address those 3 points, all chronic health challenges will begin to subside. And it all begins, point number 1, with the microbiome, with the bacteria that live in the intestine. And it's not just, by the way, how the body processes food and processes energy and processes sugar that leads to obesity, or breakdowns in that area that lead to obesity. These bacteria actually will cause food cravings. They will actually induce you to eat certain foods. Right. They'll create chemical changes that will make you go for the French fries, or go for the sugar, or go for the chocolate ice cream. Even though you're on a diet, you don't want to do it. The bacteria can have an ability to hijack brain chemistry to cause cravings and cause you to do things or eat things that you rather not, or eat things that you know you're not supposed to eat. So you know how Flip Wilson used to say, "The devil made me do it." You might say, my microbiome made me do it. My bacteria made me do it. And if it's true about cravings, it could be true about depression. It could be true about anxiety. It could be true about insomnia. It could be true about attention deficit disorder and emotional instability. There's a whole range of mental health issues that could be linked to breakdowns in the microbiome. And this is why the microbiome and the intestine are point number 1 on the triangle of disease. And throughout history, this is why the intestine, the breadbasket as they call it, the belly, the solar plexus, whatever you want to call it, right in the middle of your body, has always been considered to be the core of health, or the core of the lack of health. And they didn't know about the microbiome back then, but they sure knew about intestinal health. And as goes the microbiome, so goes intestinal health.
It's amazing how much of an effect it has, and it's so. I mean, it's kind of mind-numbing sometimes to me. We've known for 30 years that if you give a whole lot of antibiotics to cattle, that they gain weight precipitously, and yet we continue to prescribe antibiotics for what could otherwise be a common cold or something really simple that you would probably recover from on your own.
Worse than that, there are people who will stay on antibiotics for months and for years. You know, Pharmacy 101, first day of pharmacy school practically, they tell you never leave a patient on an antibiotic for longer than 14 to 28 days or so, whatever that course of therapy is. You go one course of therapy and that's it, because bacteria mutate very readily. And this is where bacterial resistance comes from. And I had a pharmacy school professor in the 1980s who warned us. He said, in 30, 40, or 50 years, you're going to be facing, the culture is going to be facing a really dramatic situation with bacterial resistance. And today, that's what's happening. There are bacteria that are resistant to ordinary antibiotics, so-called MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. That is staph bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics. They got to give you heavier and heavier doses of antibiotics, which of course cause more and more damage to the microbiome.
Right.
So really, it's kind of a catch-22. You know, I mean, you're sick, so you take an antibiotic, but that creates a situation where then the antibiotic doesn't work, and now you're sick, and you have to take a stronger antibiotic, and that creates a situation where the antibiotics don't work, and on and on and on until you get to a point where nothing works, and that is the problem. And that's why I tell people you want to stay away from antibiotics taken orally, number 1, or taken, I should say, by prescription, number 1. But you know what else? There are antibiotics in fish. There are antibiotics in meat. There's antibiotics in the water supply. There's antibiotics everywhere. You can't really get around the fact that even if you're not taking antibiotics, you're getting antibiotics. So in the meat, in the water supply, in the fish, in the dairy, in the eggs, you know, you can't get around the fact that we are swimming in an ocean of antibiotics. But what you can do is you can protect yourself, and that primarily means protecting your intestine, and you do it from several ways. Of course, the easiest way to do it is watch what you eat and stay away from foods, or as best as you can, stay away from foods that throw off intestinal health. You can also do things like eating fermented foods. You know, fermenting foods is a real easy strategy. Number 1, you just add bacteria to cabbage, and you got yourself some sauerkraut, basically. You know, it couldn't be easier. We can leverage the fact that these bacteria proliferate and are a life form on their own that have learned how to survive over the course of billions of years by simply adding them to our veggies. They'll just go and do their proliferation business, and the next day you'll have sauerkraut, or you'll have fermented beets, or you'll have pickles, or there's a whole bunch of fermented kimchi, miso, tempeh. There's a whole bunch of fermented foods that you can use that can help, number one, restore the probiotic or the microbiome balance, the bacterial balance in the intestine. But even more than that, when you ferment vegetables, you get lots of other benefits too. You get the fiber from the vegetables. The fiber acts like a prebiotic. Bacteria can deactivate lectins or compounds in vegetables and in grains and in seeds that can be problematic. Bacterially activated vegetables contain enzymes and contain acids, which are also very important for the digestive tract. And when you ferment veggies, or when you eat fermented veggies, you get nitrogen. And nitrogen is the probiotics or the microbiome's best friend. Like all living entities, nitrogen helps fuel growth. So nitrogen in the form of nitrates and nitrites and fiber and enzymes and acids, and of course the bacteria that you get make fermented veggies an ideal food for digestive health issues, an ideal food for restoring the microbiome, an ideal food for folks who are dealing with obesity issues, because now you're full. Now you've taken care of the microbiome. Now you're nutriated as well, and it becomes much easier to lose weight. Of course, if you have mental health issues or immune health issues, using these kinds of strategies to restore the integrity of the intestine and the microbiome in the intestine can be helpful there as well. And that's another important point. The intestine or the microbiome in the intestine contributes genetic material to the immune system. There's crosstalk between the immune cells, and there's crosstalk between intestinal cells and the bacteria, so much so that a lot of scientists now regard the genetics of the microbiome, the genes of the bacteria, to be a sort of reserve source of genetic material for the cells of the human that's carrying the bacteria. So it's almost like accessory genetic material is being carried in the bacteria. Not to mention all the crosstalk that's going on between the bacterial cells and the human cells and the immune cells. Right. But also it's thought anyway by some scientists that the genetics are actually held in reserve in the bacteria. So the symbiotic relationship demonstrates itself on multiple levels. Now, of course, most folks know they can take probiotic supplements, and there are wonderful probiotic supplements. We like the Nightly Essence, of course. That's got a good balance of probiotics, a bunch of different strains of bacteria, plus digestive enzymes. But probiotic supplements are a very unique form of supplement. They're not like vitamins, and they're not like minerals. With vitamins and minerals, you're getting a chemical. You're getting a molecule. Right? Vitamin C is a molecule, vitamin E is a molecule, selenium is an element. You're getting elements and molecules for small, non-living chemical structures. A probiotic is not like that. A probiotic is a living cell, right? It's a completely different thing. No pun intended, but it's a completely different animal. It's a bacterial animal. Right. So you're actually eating an animal. You're actually not really an animal, but a living creature. This makes probiotic supplements a little bit tricky to work with. And so if you try a probiotic supplement, you want to, number one, make sure you're following the directions on the probiotic supplements. Some probiotic supplements are designed to be taken with food. Some are designed to be taken on an empty stomach. Some are designed to be left in the refrigerator. Some are designed to be, or you don't have to leave in the refrigerator. You want to really follow the specific directions. And you want to create a hospitable environment inside the intestine so that bacteria can proliferate, and that's what they call using things called prebiotics. And prebiotics can be very helpful. Prebiotics, especially fiber. It's a fiber called inulin that can be helpful. Grinding up flax seeds, I've talked about that many times. You grind up flax seeds first thing in the morning, and you can drink flaxseed fiber beverage. Fiber creates a hospitable environment for the bacteria, and that's both soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. Insoluble fiber is the hard fiber that's found in seeds. The soluble fiber is the mushy fiber that's found in certain fruits and vegetables like avocados and pears and figs and dates. You got to be really careful with sugar. Sugar can throw off the bacterial balance because sugar feeds certain kinds of bacteria that can overgrow. And there's a condition, you may have heard of this, called SIBO or SIBO, which stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. This is a bacterial proliferation or hyperproliferation that occurs in response to eating the wrong foods, especially sugars. And a lot of folks who have SIBO will have problems eating fruit sugar, or even things like sorbitol, which is found in a lot of diabetic products, or xylitol. They call them sugar alcohols. You can tell by the ending OL, like sorbitol, xylitol, mannitol, erythritol. All of these are sugar alcohols, and they can also throw off intestinal health by changing water balance inside the intestine, which can also affect the microbiome. So for microbiome health, most importantly, you want to make sure you're eating fermented foods and you're also getting a good probiotic supplement, but you also got to make sure you're keeping the intestine healthy, and there's lots of nutrients for doing that. And as always, the less you eat, the better off you are anyway. So keeping your calories down, practicing calorie restriction is also a good strategy. And then keep in mind the digestive system is kind of like a car wash, like a tunnel. You know how the car goes through the tunnel and the brush comes out here, and then something gets squirted there, and something gets sucked up there, and another brush comes over here. And that's kind of food, how food gets transformed as it goes through the digestive tract from the mouth to the other end. And the intestine, the health of the intestine, the health of the microbiome, and food processing in the microbiome depend on what's happening in the stomach, and what's happening in the pancreas, and what's happening in the liver and in the gallbladder. Right. So there's a major relationship between all the components of the digestive tract. So yeah, you want to focus on intestinal health with fiber and probiotics, and maybe some glutamine powder and gelatin. And all of these are good for intestinal health. But you also got to make sure your stomach is working correctly. So you might want to make sure you're getting apple cider vinegar or hydrochloric acid drops if you have
enough salt.
Issue. Enough sodium, enough chloride, salt, exactly. Zinc for the digestive tract. You want to make sure you're producing enough acid. You also want to make sure that you're getting digestive enzymes, or making enough digestive enzymes, or enzyme supplements. You want to make sure your pancreas is working correctly. So maybe if it's not, you might want to do some sodium bicarbonate half an hour after your meals. Take bile salts for bile. So there's a very underappreciated relationship between probiotics, I should say the microbiome, the bacteria that live in the intestine, bile, and detoxification of hormones like estrogen, and detoxification of prescription drugs. And this is also very important. So if you're taking prescription drugs, or if you're on hormone replacement therapy, or if you have any estrogenic issues, and many if not most autoimmune diseases have an estrogenic component, you might want to make sure that not only are you taking care of your microbiome, but you're also taking care of your gallbladder and your liver, using things like bile support supplements, ox bile, the amino acids taurine can be helpful, and glycine, also lecithin granules. All of these can support liver health and the health of the bile, which will in turn make the microbiome healthier and make the intestine healthier and help you detoxify your drugs more effectively. And this is especially important if you're dealing with some kind of estrogenic health issue, whether it's depression or autoimmune diseases or hypothyroidism or, God forbid, a reproductive cancer, all of which are associated with improper clearance of estrogen, which can involve intestinal health and the health of the bile, and the health of the liver and the gallbladder, and also bile. And then last thing I want to say is most of your stool is actually made up of bacteria. So probiotics can actually improve constipation, improve bowel movements, give you regular bowel movements, and this can in turn improve detoxification of estrogen and improve liver and gallbladder and bile health as well.
I find it interesting that there's it's now become kind of common knowledge. I mean, I don't know if it's common knowledge, but it's been widely demonstrated in many of these thousands of studies on the microbiome that people are having different reactions to food based on the uniqueness of their own digestive tract, and that there are folks who, I mean, two different people eat the same cookie, it's not going to be the same situation.
Yes, this is why I'm not a big believer in good food, bad food. You have lists, good food, bad food, and people say, well, I'm gluten-free, but I still have my arthritis.
Right.
I'm laying off the bad foods, but I still have digestive problems. I still break out. And by the way, eczema and psoriasis and skin problems and acne can all be related to this issue as well. So we're all individuals. So nobody should, probably donuts are not good for anybody, and probably potato chips aren't good for anybody.
Right.
You may have a problem with avocados. I know a girl couldn't figure out why she was breaking out. All she was doing was eating avocados and organic veggies. It turns out avocados were making her break out. You wouldn't know, you wouldn't think that. Avocados sound like they're a healthy fruit, right? But she had a problem with avocados. There are components in fruits and vegetables that can be create reactions in different people that are idiosyncratic, that are individual to them, based on, as you say, our signature microbiomes.
And our microbiome can change over time, but it's a little bit it resists. It's got its own inertia, partly because of the relationship of our immune system with that microbiome.
Right. It's your signature microbiome from the time you're born. And the way the system is supposed to work is when you come down the birth canal, you get bathed, the baby gets bathed with the mother's microbiome.
Right.
The mother's microbiome is in the birth canal, and as the baby is passing the birth canal, it gets coated, literally, it's coated with bacteria, which go in the nose, and the mouth, and down the gullet, and into the intestine where they implant. And then the way the system's supposed to work, breast milk further encourages proliferation and implantation and the health of the microbiome. Of course, we know a third of babies are born cesarean section, and then the babies that the rest of the babies, who knows how long they were breastfed or how healthy the breast milk was, or whether there's antibiotics in the breast milk. I mean, it's really difficult for a baby to make it through babyhood or infancy, I should say, with a healthy microbiome, given the way our culture is in terms of what we're eating and what we're drinking and how we're handling our environment. So the disease process, if you understand the triangle of disease and you understand that the disease process begins at the intestine level, the intestine, the microbiome, you can see why we're dealing with this chronic degenerative disease epidemic or a situation that is affecting hundreds of millions of people. Is the quintessential definition of an epidemic of biblical proportions. Right. We're talking about a disease condition, a health condition that affects literally billions of people around the world. And this is, it all begins, it's unnecessary, it's tragic, and it all begins at the level of the microbiome.
Right, starting with birth. I mean, you mentioned 1/3 of babies being born cesarean. You're talking about the United States.
In the United States,
Brazil, good luck having a natural birth.
Second and
you
third
can't
world
find a doctor that'll do it.
Do a cesarean section?
Will not do a cesarean section.
Right. It's even worse in other countries. That's exactly right. I mean, in the United States, it's bad enough, but in the so-called industrialized world, it's even worse. Probably, I don't know the statistics, but probably in indigenous cultures, it's not as bad, where they still do things like breastfeed and have normal births or regular births. As we get more and more technologically advanced, it seems like our ability to understand how to take care of our bodies and our health conditions deteriorate further and further.
Well, they did mention in that article that there's a correlation. It's not necessarily causal. It hasn't been proved, but in terms of the date at which they started dumping antibiotics into cattle in order to make them grow faster, that's also around about the time that we started to have the obesity epidemic in the States.
Basically, even before then, as soon as antibiotics came about, think about it. It's easy to rip on antibiotics, but think about the world before antibiotics.
Yeah.
You would catch a cold, and that would be life-threatening.
Right.
Now, your baby would catch a cold, and they had to have extra babies because they just assumed one or two of your babies were going to die.
Right.
So it's infections and rotting and deterioration of produce and foods, and it was really a horrible, smelly, rotting, putrefying world we lived in up until, at least in the industrial world, until the advent of antibiotics. So all of a sudden antibiotics came out, and you could kill bacteria. You could catch a cold and you just take an antibiotic and it would go away, or you'd have an infection and you have an antibiotic. You wouldn't have to have your leg amputated.
Right, exactly.
It's kind of a miracle, right? When it first came out, and we're still, the drug companies, the pharmaceutical companies are still riding on the wave or the coattails of this penicillinization of the medical model. The medical model really got going with penicillin and with antibiotics because doctors and the medical representatives of the medical model were looked at as divine, as ancient, as saviors. Right? It was only 50 or 60 years later that we realized, well, wait a minute, ever since the 1930s, when penicillin came out, the late 1930s, the early 1940s, that's when we had all these autoimmune diseases start to explode. And that's when the cancer epidemic started to hit. And that's when heart disease started to go crazy. And that's when really all of our degenerative disease numbers started to skyrocket right around the time. I'm not saying, like you say, correlation is not causation. I'm not. It was causal, but it certainly correlated. It certainly occurred at the same time. Of course, our food supply changed, and the pollution in the air and the water became more of a significant problem, and a lot of things that happened. But probably at least a small component of our health challenges are due to this idea that we can throw antibiotics at everything and somehow be better off for it. And that includes, by the way, skincare products. And there's an antibiotic that's put in skincare products that I've been talking about for years, but now it's becoming recognized as a problem, and that's called triclosan. Have you heard of this?
Not really.
Triclosan. They don't use it as much, but you'll still find it in some products. You want to be really careful about using triclosan, especially now. First of all, triclosan, the more you use it, the more it becomes, the more it goes in the water supply, and the more it becomes an environmental toxin. But using it on your face or on your skin can disturb the microbiome of your skin as well. And today we know that your skin is loaded with microbes and bacteria, which is kind of an interesting thought when you think about it. I mean, you have microbes in your eyelash follicles. You've got little bacteria living in your eye. You got a microbiome on your eyes. On your eyes, you've got a microbiome. So you got to be really, really careful with interacting with antibiotics, whether it's taking them intentionally, and I do know sometimes you need to take them intentionally, whether it's in food or whether it's topical. If you are taking them intentionally, when you get off your course of antibiotics, make sure you're totally taking care of your microbiome with all the things we just talked about: probiotics, fermented foods, fiber, intestinal health strategy, laying off problem foods, and staying away from unintentionally ingested antibiotics as well.
Well, we don't always necessarily know what's coming, but there is a pattern that we go through these eras wherein there's a certain belief system, everybody adheres to it, everybody gets on board. When somebody comes along with some radical new idea that it goes against that, at first there's all this resistance, and everyone says, no, you don't understand, you aren't educated, or whatever it is. And then eventually, as more and more evidence comes out,
you get accepted.
And
first
this
is violently opposed, and then gradually. The philosopher Arnold or Arthur Schopenhauer said that first new ideas are violently opposed, and then, I'm paraphrasing here, and then gradually they're accepted. And then the great scientist, or the great scientific commentator Thomas Kuhn, in the book The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, he said, science progresses funeral by funeral.
Right.
I love that.
Right.
You know, the old he's got to die before the new way the new understandings can take over.
Well, hopefully not too many people have to die before we realize how vital and important this concept is of your own little rainforest inside your body.
It's great. Your own little rainforest. I like that. Think about it. Isn't that kind of cool? You got 10 times more bacterial cells than you do human cells. So if you have 100 trillion cells, you've got a quadrillion bacterial cells.
I kind of wonder about that. I mean, I have to imagine that because our physical cells are more structured, that they take up more space or something.
They're small. The bacterial cells are much tinier than human cells, than the cells that run our body. So it comes out to like 10 pounds of bacteria, which is somehow still significant. You get 10 pounds of bacteria in your body, but I don't know if 10 is the exact number, but it's something like that. But the fact is that there's more of them than there are of us. It's almost like we're a carrying case for them. We're their ride through life.
Right.
And of course they contribute. It's a symbiotic relationship. We provide them with food and an environment, a microenvironment, and they provide us with nutrients. They make vitamins too, by the way. Bacteria actually will make certain vitamins for us in addition to helping us digest our food and detoxify substances. Get yourself on a good probiotic supplement like the Nightly Essence from Youngevity. I like the Nightly Essence because you get the enzymes in there with the probiotics, and also you can support the immune system in the intestine with the IP26, which is a immune activated eggshell powder, or egg powder, not shell, but egg powder. And then also the guy who makes the Nightly Essence is a friend of mine, or formulated the Nightly Essence is a friend of mine, and I know him well, and he's not only a probiotic expert, but also an enzyme expert. So I like the Nightly Essence from Youngevity a lot.
Now, in terms of taking the nightly essence, you just take it before on an empty stomach before bed?
Personally, I take it with my supplements, but they recommend you take it at night before you go to bed. That's why it's called the nightly essence, but it doesn't really matter. But that's just the recommended, how they recommend. But in that case, it doesn't really matter. A lot of times you don't know, and it's best to follow the directions on the probiotic supplement that the manufacturer made. I personally take my nightly essence with my other supplements.
Good. So do I. All right, Ben. Well, thanks a ton.
See you, John T.
Really
We'll talk again
appreciate your
soon.
time.